many more people will die before the water crisis in the Northwest is sorted out.
In our community, we had the best water ever. But since 2007, 2008, we had infants that were dying. We buried 4 to 5 a week.
This is CheckPoint, and I'm Nkebile Mabuse.
How did a municipality end up feeding people feces?
It's a reflection of some of the challenges that exist in the provision of services.
Why in the world are babies dying from drinking water?
That's poor management.
That's culpable homicide.
Will anyone ever be punished for the deaths?
There's no way in the law that says if there's consequences, we have to lay criminal charges.
This week, we bring you shocking new details of how 3 Bloemhof babies were killed. We also expose another death trap in the Northwest.
Service delivery protests have become so commonplace in South Africa that communities are resorting to destroying property to get attention. While their violence is unnecessary, their issues are very real, and on far too many occasions, ignoring them has led to death.
April 7th, 2014, and like many underserviced communities in the Northwest Province, Boitumelong Township in Bloemhof is engulfed in pre-election service delivery protests.
The issue of us, the community are fighting us, is because of what? Our councillors, they don't look after us. Ne?
Residents torch the mayor's house and demand she be fired. They also set alight water trucks, a municipal office, a clinic and houses belonging to municipality employees. Their main gripe, sanitation and water. They claim they've had insufficient and unsafe water to drink for 5 years. The disturbance goes on for a week. Politicians promise a probe to restore calm. Post-elections, the community's burning issues are elevated to a national crisis by the deaths of 3 babies in late May. Hundreds more people are admitted to hospital after drinking contaminated water.
The outbreak has once again highlighted concerns over service delivery, especially clean water in the area.
At first, government claimed neither knowledge of nor responsibility for the immense contamination of the Vaal River, the main source of drinking water in the area.
We're quite sure the plant is clean, it has been disinfected.
In June, the municipal manager responds to questions on ENCA shortly before he's suspended.
That's why we said to people, we're going to give you water, but please ensure that you boil the water before usage.
CheckPoint has since found out that the Vaal River was not contaminated by accident, but that some of the contamination was active and deliberate. The question is, will anyone be held accountable for the unnecessary loss of life? Immediately after these untimely deaths, the Northwest Provincial Government set up a task team to investigate the source of the contamination. Mayor Mudar Makoti was immediately recalled and Municipal Manager Andrew Makopane resigned.
Distribution network.
But all of this was too little too late for 9-month-old baby Letlohonolo Sehau. He was one of the 3 infants who died of dehydration after consuming contaminated water. Numbed by shock, Gehapiwe is still mourning the death of her one and only son. She says that Letlohonolo's siblings aren't coping any better with the loss.
Especially
Gehapiwe had done nothing out of the ordinary. After breastfeeding her son, she usually gave him a few sips of boiled water. Little did she know that these sips would be deadly.
le motho ra ka ta ho ja ka ta nya batla metsi ke mona ka pinyana e ga tla batla metsi fela jwalo.
But the contamination in the water was so severe that boiling it did not kill the bacteria and viruses that thrive in feces that had found its way into the drinking water supply. Dr. Juno Thomas of the National Institute of Communicable Diseases was part of the large task team sent to investigate the diarrhea outbreak that followed.
Both boiling and using bleach decontaminate water very, very effectively. So they are both very well-known methods. There are some parasites, however, that using bleach or boiling water are not going to remove.
The deadly germs were even more dangerous in babies.
One of the concerns with babies and diarrhea is that they are always more susceptible to becoming more ill more quickly if they do get diarrhea from a virus or bacterium.
Gabby Abrahams, owner of a local funeral parlor, believes the spike in infant mortality in recent years is attributable to contaminated water.
In our community, we had the best water ever. But since 2007, 2008, there were problems with our waters. We had infants that were dying. We buried 4 to 5 a week. And it was, the cause was dehydration and vomiting. So something was wrong with our water, and it started now again in 2014. And it took me back to 2007 and 2008. So I went back to my register to look at it, and I saw how many infants we lost at that time.
Gehapiwe says no one from the municipality has come back to explain exactly what happened.
Masipala ina ba re ene ha ba ka to buisana bohle ba tla tlisa ko ra se ba re ba tla tlisa kana ke ntho se dithuso hela se mo ba thusang teng gore ntlo le ntlo ba tla kenya ko re ba tlhaetse ntho tse teng ba ka kenya ba ka tlisa dithuso tse tla ka envelope ba ka tlisa ngore ntlo le ntlo gore ke thuso tse go masipala mara se a sa ditselino.
They dug a slough there to take the spillage away from the site here, you know. The spillage is running straight to the river now.
When the dust had settled, CheckPoint went to Bloemhof to investigate the source of this devastating contamination. Our probe brought us here, to this golf course sandwiched between the contaminated river and the sewage works. We wanted to find out how the sewage ended up in the river and ultimately in the tap water. Philip Smith is club captain at Bloemhof Golf Course. He tells us that the course started flooding with sewage in May, about 2 weeks before the baby deaths.
We complain at the municipality that the spillage is running over this tee box and over the greens.
He says the municipality sent people to deviate the sewage.
They dug a slough there to take the spillage away from the site here, you know.
This is the slough or trench that Smith is referring to. He says sewage was fiercely overflowing from this manhole onto the golf course. To alleviate his problem, the municipality simply channeled the sewage straight into the river, contaminating it directly.
And that's what happened. The spillage is running straight to the river now.
20 meters away is where the contaminated water was at the very same time being extracted to supply the community. Feces-infested water, too toxic for this treatment plant to purify. The Department of Water Affairs had warned the municipality as early as 2006 that its sewage infrastructure needed a complete overhaul, At that stage, it would have cost the municipality a mere 3 million rand. The amount has now escalated to 20 million. Dr. Thomas says they found a cocktail of deadly bacteria and viruses in the water.
There wasn't just one pathogen or one organism that was being transmitted amongst all of the sick people and causing disease, but rather that they were being exposed to the same source that was contaminated with a range of different viruses and bacteria.
Having failed to sort out the infrastructure problem for nearly a decade, the municipality was now cutting corners, desperate to make the problem go away. An emergency cleanup was launched, and in an attempt to get rid of the viruses and bacteria as quickly as possible, officials went overboard on the chlorine, endangering lives even further.
The technical team is concerned about the high levels of chlorine in the water, and they say the high levels of chlorine is caused by the disinfection that was done in our system earlier.
We consulted independent water engineer Friki Botha about the use of high amounts of chlorine to clean contaminated water. He says the municipality should have first checked what bacteria it was dealing with in order to ascertain how much chlorine would be needed and how much was safe to use.
And if you disinfect it with chlorine, if some of the contaminants were not properly removed, it can react with the chlorine and even produce more harmful components.
Water warns of another looming crisis in Hartbeespoort Dam. Government started building these low-cost houses in 2012. People have already moved in without properly functioning sanitation services.
Unfortunately, the necessary planning was not done properly to ensure that all the services will be available when people want to move into their houses.
The sewage treatment plant has no electricity, therefore it cannot operate. So the municipality is sending raw sewage to the effluent dams.
The effluent dams are starting to fill up with untreated sewage. And if this reaches the point where it starts to overflow into the receiving environment, we will have a severe contamination of the potential underground water resource, which is the only water resource, except from rainwater, for the small holdings in the vicinity. We will also be faced with the situation that people will get sick as a result of this contamination by untreated sewage in their drinking water.
The Northwest Province is by no means the only problem area in the country. A recent report by the Human Rights Commission paints a bleak national picture. It says municipalities throughout the country have collapsing water treatment plants. In 2008, poor water quality killed more than 130 babies in the Eastern Cape. Diarrhea is the top cause of child mortality in South Africa, accounting for nearly 19% of under 5 deaths. According to research commissioned by the Department of Health, socio-economic and environmental factors like the lack of clean water are the main cause. Ultimately, it is the poorest of the poor whose children are more likely to die unnecessarily.
When we return, the new Minister of Water Affairs and Sanitation responds to our investigation. Minister, thank you so very much for giving us your time. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Nkepli.
We'd like to speak to you about the North, where the issues in the Northwest generally, and Bloemhof in particular. We've had a tragedy unfold in that part of our country. Who do you hold responsible, ultimately?
The municipal manager.
Are criminal charges going to be instituted against them?
When you hold people accountable, amongst other things that you look at, it's the actions that have to be taken against them. He has since lost his job.
He resigned, yes.
He resigned. He was first suspended by us pending the investigation, and he has since resigned, which was not his intention before this occurrence. And if there are any criminal charges that have to be laid, it's not criminal charges that have to be taken by the minister. There's nowhere in the law that says if there's consequences, you have to lay criminal charges.
There are 3 deaths.
The families, and my conversation with the families was that you are at liberty to seek recourse against the state.
It's my understanding that a charge has been laid already by AfriForum against the municipality for the deaths. So you will support any criminal charge that's laid and make information accessible.
We will not stand on anybody's way.
Have you been able to determine how the contamination actually happened?
One, there was an upgrade of a pump station, and then there were protests, and there was the destruction of property. But in the course of the upgrades, the municipality appointed some people without competency, and there was poor monitoring. And to add on, then there was this public protest before the last general elections, and everything then added on to the situation. And precisely because of that, then there was this spillage, there was the inability of anybody to go onto the site and make the necessary interventions. And hence we're saying the reasons are not only because of the protests, but even prior to the protest, the manner in which the whole program of the upgrades in the area were handled had actually compromised what the state could have done through local government.
We went on the ground and we did our own investigation. The sewage was spilling over a golf course and then spilling onto a river. The people who are running the golf course say that the sewage was spilling for 2 weeks before the deaths. So even in that 2 weeks, something could have been done.
Prior to the protest, there was neglect of the management by the municipality. No early warning systems, no use of monitoring and evaluation so that then you detect all these kind of things. There was no promptness on the side of those at the local level who were supposed to do the work, and hence the drastic actions that we had to take. And whether people at the golf course are saying this, fact of the matter is that there was dereliction of duty.
Minister, are you aware that when the spillage happened in one particular manhole near this golf course, they contacted the municipality, and the municipality did respond. They sent people, according to the people that we've spoken to at the golf course, and what these people allegedly did, and we've seen it with our own eyes, is dig a trench that basically channeled the sewage into the river.
But isn't it that dereliction of duty in Kepile? That's exactly why we've acted.
Contaminating the water.
That's dereliction of duty. That's poor management.
That's culpable homicide.
That's what we're dealing with. I do not want to give it any other definition, but in the space where we are, we believe that somebody failed to execute his or her responsibility. We have acted on them.
Are you aware that in 2006, the Department of Water Affairs outlined all the issues and even estimated that it would cost 3 million rand to upgrade the infrastructure in that area? Now we've set aside 20 million rand, which is almost 7 times that much. If the upgrades would have been done in 2006, we wouldn't be in the situation. The children would still be alive, and we wouldn't be spending 20 million rand.
It's an indictment, because the issue is not only about financial constraints. It is also the inability to utilize that is at your disposal, but also bad planning, because those kind of projects...
Also having the wrong people in positions.
I'm saying bad planning goes with everything. Do you have the right plan? Do you have the right implementers? Do you have the right means of monitoring? Do you have the necessary resources? So all of that borders on planning. I don't want to be anecdotal. What we need to improve the entire value chain of providing services to our people.
So more people need to be fired who are incompetent?
You don't need to fire people. You need to make sure that you deploy people, you allocate responsibilities on the basis of their capacity, so that then you don't have to have the burden of firing people out of water contamination.
In Madibeng, we did see people being removed from their positions, but we have recently discovered that Buti Makongela, who was the speaker, who was fired when there was protests and deaths in Madibeng, now works for Bujanala municipality. So he was just shifted from one place to another.
He was the speaker?
Yes.
I think the NC must act on those things. The NC, not the Minister of Water Affairs, but it's not right. We must establish exactly why this has happened. We can't play a chess game of incompetent people being moved from one place to the other at the expense of our people. When there are consequences, they must actually be carried to the latter.
How would you respond, lastly, Minister, to people who listen to you but say, we've heard this all before, things will change, and then you have more deaths and more tragedy?
It's not in our mission to have deaths. Where it occurs, people must be held accountable.
Last week, we brought you a story of a young schoolgirl accused of being a Satanist. We asked you whether you think schools should be focusing on religion or psychology to deal with these issues. This is how you responded on Twitter.
Regarding our Satanism story, Chloe wrote, "But why do parents sit and witness the change in their children, then leave it to the last minute to deal with such issues? Sadly, Chloe, far too many South African children are being raised by poor single mothers who are doing the best they can under the circumstances." Sasha wrote, "So they went from Satanism to maths, no solution regarding Satanism? Well, Sasha, you'll be pleased to know that after our broadcast, the Education Department decided to start combining religious intervention with psychological assessments. So we will be bringing you a full update soon." Regarding our piece on the Maths Olympiad and Professor Pakeng, Douglas D.K. wrote the sweeping statement: "Black teenagers are in love with grooving and partying, so maths does not intrigue them." Douglas, you look like a groover yourself. Hope the prof inspired you. By the way, our ranking has dropped again from 58 to 64. This week's hashtag is checkpoint_water.
That's all from us this week. Please do give us your feedback. Our Twitter handle is @checkpoint_ENCA. Thanks for watching. I'm Nkepile Mabuse.